Canada's new Prime Minister meets the President, although perhaps not the President you'd expect to be the priority. Mark Carney's first official visit was to Paris, not Washington.
I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries. Your Majesty.
Next stop, Buckingham Palace, for a meeting with the King of both the United Kingdom and Canada, and then on to Downing Street. Mark Carney reaching out to what he called reliable allies as a trade conflict with Canada's neighbour deepens.
The actual tariffs are having an impact. They're having an impact. The impact of weakening U.S. economy has an impact on everyone else. But of course it has a direct impact as well on the affected countries. It's not welcome. We are going to get stronger, while those who take trade actions get weaker.
Some see it slightly differently. 4 months ago, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development forecast the Canadian economy would grow by 2% this year. Today, that estimate was trimmed to 0.7%. The downgrade for Mexico was even greater. The OECD thinks Mexico's heading for recession, the economy contracting this year and next if tariffs are sustained. By contrast, the downgrade to the US economy was tiny. The OECD has cut its forecasts for 12 countries, among them the UK. Growth of 1.4% is unlikely to leave the average household feeling better off, although the estimate is the second highest of the G7 economies after the United States. If the OECD is right, then Donald Trump's trade war will not secure any of the outcomes he promises, and the concern is the conflict could escalate.
A trade fragmentation could result in lower growth and higher inflation. By discouraging business investment and increasing costs for production inputs,
exports of steel and aluminium to the US are now taxed at 25%. But even if the UK can avoid further direct tariffs, our economic prospects are sagging at a terrible time for the Chancellor. Next week's spring statement may include unpopular decisions. Joel Hills, News at 10.
And Robert is here to talk about this. Robert, Mark Carney said today that he thought America would suffer more than the likes of Canada and us, and we'd emerge relatively in better off or less damage out of this. Is that fair or unfair?
Well, it's all a question of how countries like the UK and Canada react. I mean, we should be under no illusion, as we just heard from Joel. Tariffs are damaging the whole world. Costs going up for businesses and consumers, economies slowing down, inflation going up. And one of the things that's really striking is that in America, the architect of all of this, actually, the collapse in confidence is extraordinary. There was something called the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey just the other day, which showed that Americans' fears of losing their jobs are now at levels that you don't normally see outside of a recession. And although the economy is going down in America, we're not yet at a recession, but you can just see how anxious American citizens are. Now, what we've seen in Europe and what we're seeing in Canada is economies basically massively reducing their dependence on America and American trade and coordinating their policies much more. Now, if this can be pursued in a rational, consistent way, then yes, despite the damage that Trump is doing, at the end of all of that, you could see Europe and Canada relatively stronger than America, that would pay the biggest price. Of course, there is a long way to go before we get to those sunny uplands. But just looking, for example, at what Germany is doing, massive increase in defence spending, and they are saying pretty much all of that money will go to European countries, including Britain's own BAE Systems, which makes the Typhoon jet. So there are plainly opportunities for the UK in this crisis. For Keir Starmer, there is another opportunity, which is up to now, the weakness of the British economy has all been on him and Rachel Reeves. So, of course, he can now blame Donald Trump, except for one thing, he doesn't like to blame Donald Trump for anything, does he?
No, indeed he doesn't.
Silly me for suggesting
Yes, indeed, silly you.